All right, so get ready because today we're going to be looking at some really cool research on Japanese speech recognition.
Yeah, pretty cutting edge stuff.
You bet. You sent over those articles, and I got to say I'm really curious to dig in with y'all.
Yeah, and I'm excited to talk about it, especially this new approach they're calling lenient character recognition.
Lenient CR.
Yeah.
Okay, so when I first saw that term, I have to admit, I thought, wait, are we just letting computers spell however they want now? But it's actually way more nuanced than that, right?
Oh, definitely. It's more about acknowledging that in Japanese there can be multiple, totally valid ways to spell the same word. It all depends on the context. Like, think about the word advisor. In English, you might have, like, advisor or advisor. But in Japanese, you've got options for writing it in hiragana, katakana, or kanji.
Oh, wow.
And each one has, those subtle shades of meaning or, like, how formal it sounds.
So it's not about, like, lowering the bar for accuracy. It's more like expanding how we even define correct.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the computer has to get the intent behind the words, not just the characters themselves.
Right, right. It's thinking more like a person.
Exactly. And that's where this whole lattice thing comes in. So picture like a web of all the possible correct spellings for a word or phrase.
Okay.
And they're all connected based on these linguistic rules and how they're related.
That's wild.
It's pretty cool. That's what the researchers have managed to create.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this is way more complex than just saying, any spelling works. But how do they actually build this lattice? I mean, that sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah, it's pretty involved. You use they use a bunch of different tools.
Okay.
First, they convert any kanji to its hiragana equivalent.
So it's like simplifying it first.
Right. Using a text normalization system.
Okay, got it.
And then they find all the possible katakana versions of that word.
Oh, I see. So they're covering all those different writing systems right from the start.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about kanji? There can be so many kanji for the same word. How do they figure out which one's right?
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. They use this neural machine translation model.
Okay.
But instead of translating between languages, they use it to translate from hiragana, bisiki, to kanji.
Wait, so they're translating from Japanese to Japanese?
Yeah.
Why would they do that?
Because, kanji can have different readings and meanings depending on the context.
Mm-hmm.
And by using this machine translation model, they can use the surrounding words to figure out the most likely kanji the speaker meant.
Wow.
It's like having a dictionary that actually, understands the nuances of the language.
Oh, that is really cool. So it's not just looking up a word, it's like figuring out the puzzle of the sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, even for a word that could have 12 different kanji spellings, the system is looking at the whole sentence to pick the best fit.
That's crazy. Talk about working smarter, not harder. But what happens when, even after all that, there are still multiple kanji that could work?
Well, they thought of that too.
Yeah.
They have this Japanese orthographic dictionary,
Right.
and they use it to group words with the same meaning together, like into these equivalence classes. So any word in the same class, they count it as, basically interchangeable.
At least meaning-wise, yeah.
Exactly.
So even if the computer picks a kanji that's, different from what a human might choose, it's still counted as right as long as the meaning's the same.
Right.
That's so smart. Like, they're working with the flexibility of the language, not against it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but does this actually make a difference in the real world? I mean, it all sounds great in theory, but...
Well, the real test is how it performs in practice.
Yeah.
So to figure that out, they actually use this approach on 3 different data sets.
Oh, yeah.
They had far-field speech data, voice search queries, and even transcripts from YouTube videos.
So like a pretty wide range of actual speech out in the wild?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's a good sign, I guess. And what did they find? Like, did this actually make things better?
The results were pretty impressive.
Yeah.
They saw a pretty significant reduction in the character error rate. So, it ranged from 2.4% to 3.1%, depending on the data set.
Okay, so that might not sound like a lot, but I'm guessing in speech recognition, that's a pretty big deal.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even a tiny improvement can be huge. It's like, shaving off a few seconds from a world record sprint.
Right.
But they didn't just stop at the numbers. They actually went back and, manually looked at cases where the system thought there was a mismatch.
So they were, double-checking the computer's work.
Yeah, basically.
That's commitment.
Mm-hmm.
So what did they learn from that?
Well, they found that in a lot of those cases, the system was actually right.
Really?
Yeah. It had found these other valid spellings that the older, stricter systems would have counted as mistakes.
So it wasn't just getting lucky, it was actually understanding the language on a deeper level.
Exactly. It was able to figure out what the person meant, even if the spelling wasn't what, a person might have chosen.
Wow, this is pretty groundbreaking stuff. We're talking about like a totally different way of looking at speech recognition, especially for languages like Japanese.
Yeah, and it's not just Japanese. This could change how we approach speech recognition for any language with, complex spelling or lots of dialects.
Okay, now that's mind-blowing. But before we get ahead of ourselves, are there any like downsides to being this lenient? Could it end up like accepting wrong spellings?
Well, remember, it's not about accepting any spelling.
Right.
It's about understanding which spellings are actually valid within the rules of the language.
It's like a grammar checker that knows when to say, hey, this is wrong, and when to say, you could also say it like this.
Right, exactly. And building that lattice is a big part of that. By using all these tools and resources, they're making sure the system doesn't stray too far from what's accepted.
So it's like they're giving the computer guidelines, but also the freedom to like work within those guidelines to find the best spelling.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's really fascinating. But I'm guessing there are still challenges they have to, figure out. What's next for this research? Where do they go from here?
Well, one thing they want to do is bring in the concept of style or register into the evaluation process.
Oh.
Like how certain spellings might be better in certain situations than others.
Yeah, like you'd use a more formal kanji in a business email, but maybe a casual hiragana version in a text.
Exactly. So they want to teach computers to understand those nuances too.
So they're not just grammatically correct, but like socially appropriate too.
Yeah, exactly. They're calling these augmented lattices.
Augmented lattices. Okay, so we're talking about computers that don't just know words, but they know like how to use them in the right way.
Right, like they're understanding the context.
Wow, that's incredible. What else are they looking into? Are they gonna like actually use this in real world stuff?
Oh yeah. They're looking at using these augmented lattices to not just evaluate speech recognition, but to actually like train the models themselves.
Whoa, so they're like using it to teach the computers in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
That's amazing. And I bet that could lead to like way better voice assistants, right?
Oh, absolutely. Imagine a voice assistant that actually gets what you mean and talks back in a natural way, taking into account all those subtle things about the language.
Yeah, that would be game changing.
And they're looking into using large language models to, to refine the process of judging spelling equivalence. It's really pushing the limits of what we thought computers could do with language.
That's really exciting. It sounds like this could like fundamentally change how we interact with technology.
Yeah, I think so.
But before we go too far down that road, I want to come back to what we talked about earlier. What really stood out to you as the most, important part of this whole lenient CR thing?
I think the biggest takeaway is that it challenges how we think about evaluating these language technologies. We're moving away from this, super strict rule-based system and embracing the fact that language is, it's just messy sometimes.
Right. It's like we're finally admitting that language is alive, It changes and grows all the time, and we can't just cram it into a little box.
Yeah, exactly. And by accepting that complexity, we can actually open up so many more possibilities for how we use technology to understand and work with language.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive. We've covered so much already, and I feel like there's still so much more to talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
I can't wait to hear what else you've found in these articles.
Me too. There's some really interesting stuff about how this could actually be used and some of the ethical stuff that comes with it.
Okay, now you've got me really intrigued. Let's take a closer look at those real-world applications next. This is just getting started.
So you're asking about real-world applications.
Yeah.
Like where could this actually make a difference?
I mean, it's all super interesting theoretically, but I want to know, how does this actually help people using this technology?
Well, one place it could be huge is voice search.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine, like, you're trying to find a restaurant or a shop, in Japan, and you're using voice search. With the old way of doing things, if you don't pronounce the name perfectly or use the exact right kanji, you might get no results.
Oh, I've totally been there. It's so frustrating.
It is.
Like, what you're looking for, but the tech just doesn't get it.
Right. But with lenient CR, The system could understand that, like, hey, all these different spellings or pronunciations, they all mean the same place. It could even, like, account for dialects or just, like, how people say things differently.
So even if I completely butcher the name of that ramen shop I loved, it could still figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you mention, landmarks or other stuff.
Oh, that's pretty amazing.
And think about accessibility, too.
Yeah, yeah.
People with speech impairments, accents,
Mm-hmm.
it could be way easier for them to use voice stuff if the system's more flexible.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, this tech could help a lot of people who might not be able to use this stuff otherwise.
Are there any other areas where this could be applied beyond voice search, I mean?
Oh, tons.
Ah.
Like machine translation,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Japanese to English especially.
Yeah.
That's notoriously tough.
Oh, tell me about it. I've seen some pretty funny mistranslations online.
Right. All because of those multiple writing systems and like you really need to understand the context.
I've definitely noticed current translation software still has a long way to go.
Yeah, for sure. But with lenient CR, translation software could like pick the right English word even if the Japanese has, a bunch of possible spellings.
Oh, okay.
So you'd get more accurate, more nuanced translations.
That's exciting. I can imagine that being super helpful for like researchers or businesses or anyone who needs to like communicate across languages.
Exactly.
What about education? I could see this being a game changer for language learning.
Oh, for sure. Imagine like a language learning app that doesn't just, mark you wrong if your kanji is a little different.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead, you could be like, hey, the spelling works in this situation and give you feedback.
That would be so much better than just right or wrong. You'd actually learn more about the language.
Right. And it would help people who are, who are struggling with kanji
It'd
especially.
make it less scary.
Yeah. More approachable.
This is making me think about like how tech can actually help us learn languages better. It's not just about like memorizing stuff.
No, it's about like understanding how the language actually works.
Exactly. And that's what this whole lenient CR thing does so well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's moving away from those strict rules.
Yeah.
Embracing how fluid language can be.
It's like we're finally teaching computers to think more like people.
Yeah.
But are there like concerns about this? Could it like be misused somehow?
That's a great question.
Like, could it lead to accepting stuff that's just plain wrong?
It's definitely something to think about. With any new technology, there's always, a risk of it being used the wrong way.
Okay, so what kind of risks are we talking about here?
One thing that worries people is misinformation.
Oh, right.
If the system is too lenient, it might, transcribe false information without even noticing.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, it can make fake news even harder to stop.
Because the computers just think it's all good, right?
Exactly. So researchers and developers really have to, be careful and build in safeguards.
Right. So it's not just about being lenient. It's about making it, I guess, smarter, more discerning about what it actually believes.
Exactly. It has to be accurate, AD responsible.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a good reminder that even, the coolest new tech comes with responsibilities.
Oh, absolutely.
This has been a really thought-provoking conversation. I'm seeing how this could really change how we interact with tech,
Yeah, it's exciting.
But it's also like a wake-up call to be more careful, more thoughtful about how we use this stuff.
Yeah, for sure. We have to make sure it's used to help people communicate better.
Not to, trick them or take advantage of them.
Exactly. That's a great point.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
Definitely.
It's been really, really interesting to look at this and to think about what it means for language and technology in general.
Yeah, it's been fun to talk about it with you.
I'm so glad you could join us for this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
And I know our listeners will they'll want to hear your final thoughts on all this.
Well, I think the main thing is that language is, it's messy and complicated.
Yeah.
And we need tech that reflects that,
Yeah.
that can handle all the nuances.
Mm-hmm.
And I think lenient CR shows us how we can start to do that.
I think that's a perfect way to put it. We've talked about so much today.
We have.
Like the technical details, the applications, the ethical stuff.
Yeah, it's been a great conversation.
It has. I always enjoy getting to talk about these cutting-edge topics with you.
Me too.
And I know our listeners appreciate your insights as well.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all this?
I'd say stay curious, keep exploring, And, don't underestimate the power of language. It connects us all.
Beautifully said. And until next time, keep diving deep.
It's really kind of wild to think how far speech recognition has come.
Oh, it's incredible.
Like even just in the past few years. And this research, the lenient CR stuff,
Yeah.
it's a great example of how things are changing.
It really is. We're really pushing the limits.
It feels like we're at this point where computers are starting to, I don't know, not just hear words, but actually get them on a deeper level.
Totally. And that opens up so many possibilities,
Yeah.
For how we use tech, how we interact with it.
I'm especially excited about breaking down those language barriers.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine talking to someone in a totally different language
Mm-hmm.
and having it feel natural, like a real conversation in real time.
That's the dream, right?
Yeah. And I think this research is a big step towards making that happen.
I think so, too.
But we talked about those ethical things, too.
Right.
As this gets, more advanced.
We got to be careful.
Yeah. Are there biases in the data they're using to train these systems? And could it be used to, spread misinformation or discriminate against certain groups?
Absolutely. We have to consider all of that.
It's like any powerful tool, right? It can be used for good or bad.
Yeah. Comes down to us to use it responsibly.
To make sure it's actually helping people.
Right.
Not hurting them.
We need to have these conversations now, I think.
Yeah.
While it's still, relatively early.
So we can steer it in the right direction.
Exactly.
This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. I've learned a ton about language and the potential of this new approach.
Me too. It's been fun.
I'm so glad you could join us to talk about it all.
It's been great. It's always fascinating to see how research in one area can impact, so many others.
I think our listeners will find this pretty mind-blowing, too.
I hope so. It's, it's an exciting field for sure.
Before we finish up, is there anything else you want to add about, I don't know, the future of this research or speech recognition in general?
I'm just really eager to see where this lenient CR stuff goes, how it's used in real products and services. We've only just scratched the surface.
It's a good reminder that we're living in a pretty amazing time technologically.
For sure.
And it's up to us to use these advances, for good.
Well said.
Thanks again for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Japanese speech recognition.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We hope you found it informative and maybe even inspiring.
And as always, keep diving deep.